All right, Peter Boghossian, thanks so much for joining me.
My pleasure, Jake. How are you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. So Peter Boghossian Peter Boghossian,
Rhymes with explosion, baby.
rhymes with explosion, is a you're a philosopher and you're also an author. You're known for your work in critical thinking and atheism and the study of modern social and cultural issues. So one of the reasons I reached out to you is that a few weeks ago I had a debate with Jonathan Pageau that has 28,000 views on YouTube from a few weeks ago. I started the conversation to talk about Christian symbolism, and it soon delved into a debate on Christianity. I saw you had a similar and format conversation with him like a week ago. So tell me about that. How did that conversation come about, and what do you take away from it?
I met Jonathan at an Unheard event in London, and I liked him. I thought he was a good guy. And I said to him in the context of that conversation, I was complaining about critical social justice, and he said, I'm paraphrasing, something like, yeah, it's a religion. And I think, in 2014, James Lindsay and I published a piece. Jerry Coyne wrote about it. A few other people wrote about it. I think that the page is down. It was in a venue called All Think, maybe. I'm not sure. That privilege is the original sin. And we talked about the tenets of the new ideology and the new religion and what that meant. And Jonathan was also complaining about it because he shares many of my concerns. I think I might even be more concerned about it than he is, oddly enough. But then I said, well, what I don't understand is, how do you recognize that as an issue, that religion as an issue, but you don't realize your own religion is an issue? And so we talked about it for quite a while. And then he said, well, why don't you come on the show? And so that's when I did. I just came on the show and we had a conversation about a range of philosophical and theological issues relating to truth, Christianity in general.
And how'd you feel it went? Like, did you come away feeling good? Do you think you convinced him? Did you learn anything?
My goal wasn't to convince him of anything. My goal was to figure out why he believed what he believed. That's the key, by the way, to an impossible conversation. Is if you have incommensurable worldviews, you want to think, you want to reset the way you think about things. And it's not to deliver a message. It's not to win. It's to figure out, if someone believes something that is radically different than what you believe, then figure out why they believe it. Like, what do they know that you don't know? Now, could be nothing, but what is their reason for holding the belief? So that's what I was genuinely, sincerely curious about, why someone would believe things that I find preposterous.
So you weren't necessarily trying to go in with a set of arguments to convince him why he shouldn't believe it, but rather to understand why he does believe it and ask him questions that challenge him, but not necessarily to convince him, but just to gain an understanding for yourself.
I didn't even want to challenge him. I just wanted to figure out why he believes it. It's just so patently absurd to me. It's hard for me to believe that people believe this, but I believe he believes it. I believe Rod Dreher, who's another friend of mine, believes it. I believe Paul Vanderklay. I like Paul quite a bit. I think he's a great guy. We do think, I know a lot of believing Christians who genuinely believe it, and I find that baffling.
But you were challenging him a bit when you said to him, when you mentioned the study about the fact that prayer doesn't help
the
patients.
Harvard prayer study, yeah.
He didn't really, it didn't seem to resonate with him. And then you said, listen, what I just said to you should have given you pause, should have made you skeptical. And so that was a challenge. I mean, you were trying to get him to see your point of view in that moment.
No, I mean, I only said that because, so if you're making an empirical claim, if you're making a claim about reality, and you're saying that intercessory prayer has some putative outcome, the people who are prayed for, I don't know, recover more quickly or more thoroughly or with less medicine, whatever the claim is, then you're making a claim about the world. The moment you make a claim about the world, then it's an empirical claim, you can turn the tools of science on it. And that's exactly what we've done. Now, I don't expect that to change anybody's mind. It's somewhat irrelevant if it does or does not. But the point is that it's a method of knowing. And if you want to repudiate that method of knowing, or if you want to say that method of knowing is somehow illegitimate and the belief still stands, then I want to know, how could that be? Why would that be? And again, it's not a confrontational thing. It's a sincere question.
Do you feel like he answered your question?
Let's see. I don't remember. I don't think I watched it back. I I I think so. This is the situation in which we find ourselves. People are making very specific claims about reality, and you can do any kind of a dodge, a semantic dodge, anything you want, but either someone did walk on water or they did not. Either someone resurrected from the dead or they did not. Now, if you don't want to put these things in linguistic format, I don't know what you do. Would you just go like, I don't know, like you have to kind of, these are sentences that people use. These are truth claims about the world. Now you can bundle that with some kind of utilitarian calculus, like, oh, this is good for everybody, or this is the greatest good for the greatest number if this happens, or I can see from my lived experience or the benefits in my life, but you're still making a truth. At the end of the day, like, you just can't avoid that. It's just a claim about reality. You're making a claim about reality. It's just that simple.
And therefore, you should be able to defend it, or at least explain why you think it's true. Is that what you're saying?
No.
Like, in other words, I
No.
guess my question is, what is it? What is the meaning of truth claims? What are truth claims, and why do they matter?
Oh boy, that's a huge conversation. So
Let's just go with the first part. What's a truth claim?
So a truth claim is so we speak to each other in language, and we capture phenomena through language. And so there's the idea that words broadly hook to things, or maybe it's specifically hooked to things in the world. So if I say, there is oat milk in this coffee, or there are 2 ice cubes in that coffee, or this is a cup of coffee, or this is a glass, there are words that we use, and those words form sentences. And in philosophy, we call those propositions. And either those accord to reality or they don't. And there are, in between cases, or different cases, like the present king of France is bald, or when you have different reference for words. But if you're making a specific claim about someone rising from the dead after they died, or Jesus Christ walking on water, those are very specific claims. You're using language to capture a truth about the world. Now, there are many truths about the world that we cannot capture through the tools of science. Like, I don't know, how many leaves were in Manchester in 1486. Now that there's a definite answer to that question, but we can't test it. But we can certainly test the question about prayer, intercessory prayer. No problem. We've done it. And you can deny the study. I mean, that's absolutely within your not just political and epistemological right, but you have if you think there's a bad methodology, or if you think, but it's a claim about the world. Like, you're saying, listen, when people pray for other people, there are these outcomes. Okay, well, let's test that. And nobody should have any dog in the fight. So if the results of the study shows, yes, it's true, then that's probably a reason for a follow-up study. If the result from the study shows it's not true, because it is an extraordinary claim. But if you want to claim that it's not, if you want to claim that in spite of the evidence that it's not true, that it is true, then you need a reason for that.
Right.
That's not an unreasonable thing for me to say. In fact, that's the most eminently reasonable of all things for me to say.
It seemed like during your interview with Jonathan Pageau, you made full, complete points, a full, complete argument that he didn't seem to contend with or acknowledge. And you stayed patient, and you moved to the next point, and your analogies got more and more complex to where you're asking questions that might seem like they're deviating from the original question, but it's only because the study about prayer didn't convince him, and you didn't feel like you're getting direct answers, and so you're making analogies. And throughout all of this, you spent over an hour really just trying to understand his view. And what I found remarkable is that still 45 minutes in, you're a smart guy. Why didn't you understand his view? I think it's because it was not comprehensible to you. Is that accurate, or how did you feel?
Could be a lot of reasons for why that's the case. It could be that he really has, as Plantinga says, he has a kind of God sensor, Like, there are just some people born with God sensors and some people not, kind of like litmus. Some people can test litmus, but some people can't. And so if that's the case, then you need to create an infrastructure to explain, an epistemological and linguistic infrastructure to explain why it is that you cannot, let me phrase it this way. This is a more politic way of saying it. Why it is that the other person cannot understand your lived experience. The closest thing that I can come to, the closest analog that I can come to that will be lost on 99.9% of the people, but the 0.1% of the people will get it instantly, is people who have done DMT. That's the closest analog I can come to think to. They're just incommensurable experiences.
So why do you think Jonathan Pageau believes what he believes? Where do you think he's right? Where do you think he's wrong? What's your take on his belief?
About what specifically? Jesus rising from the dead, or?
Let's go with that. Yeah.
Why does he believe it? I believe that he believes it. Ultimately, you'd have to ask him why he believes it, but because it's a cogent, probably the most cogent explanatory mechanism for life, for reality, for his lived experience in the world, for his personal experience of the world. I believe that he believes it because it's a sense-making mechanism for him. I believe that he believes it because he sees the fruits of Christianity around him and sees Christian communities as opposed to other communities. I believe that he believes it because it's tethered to his idea of morality and what it means to be a good person and what it means to belong to a healthy, thriving community. I think there are a lot of reasons why he believes it. And I then think that he's created, along with probably a lot of literature, less so the technical stuff by N.T. Wright, and more so the sense-making mechanism of Wernicke, and maybe to an extent Peterson, to use a more contemporary example. And then I think he's created a structure for that meaning in his life. I think that's a very charitable and honorable way to frame it. It's probably also very true.
Do you have a less charitable way to frame it?
Yeah, that he's fundamentally wrong about the nature of reality, and he's constructed some kind of a architectonic system, both epistemological and linguistic, to make sense of that belief that he holds, and that belief is not defeasible. It's not falsifiable.
Throughout this conversation, you had a lot of patience. It seemed like, to me, it seemed like you were making an argument. That argument wasn't. It felt like it wasn't. You move. You don't let me assume. I mean, it seemed like you moved from one to the next with patience. How did you do that? I mean, how did you have the patience to kind of
get answer that question all the time? That's the number one question I've probably asked. You should see the confrontation at PSU video. That you should put a link to that. I've probably got that question more than anything else. But it's really sincere. I actually really like Jonathan, and I'm genuinely curious as to why he believes. Like, I'm seriously curious as to why he and so many people believe this. Because it just makes no sense to me whatsoever. Like, I can understand being in a community of people with whom you hold similar values. I can understand a lot of the trappings of it, but again, it comes back to whether or not it's true. You can be a member of I don't know, it's a phony martial art like Taekwondo or something. You can be a member of this community, it can make you feel good, etc. But at the end of the day, you're really saying it's about winning a fight.
Yeah. Meaning, what is it? Break down that analogy for me.
Well, you believe something, and many people have written about this. This is an old and also a very recent pedigree. Dan Dennett wrote about it, Harris, William Lane Craig. A lot of people who would not normally be bedfellows agree on this. In order to say you believe something, you have to think it's true. You can't believe something that you don't think is true. You can try to believe something. You can kind of
they believe it. They believe it in their heart, for sure. That's what you're saying.
I mean, I think Roger Ayer is a great example of that. I think he genuinely believes it. And that shouldn't prevent you from hanging out with someone. I love hanging out with Roger. I love hanging out with my Christian friends. I enjoy my friend Rodrigo. I'm going to see him in Hungary in a few weeks. I'm pretty sure he's a serious Christian too. I have a lot of friends who are serious Christians. I think that they're fundamentally mistaken about the nature of reality, but that doesn't mean that I don't like to hang out and eat and have a good time with them, joke around and talk about life. In fact, it kind of makes it more interesting.
No, it's good.
Like Phil Vischer, I think he's wrong about the nature. I mean, anybody who I think all of metaphysics is kind of nonsense anyway. So, but again, mere differences of opinion like that shouldn't. And I like these guys. I like Paul. The time I met him, Paul Van der Klee. I mean, I genuinely like these guys, but I just think that they're fundamentally wrong, and they think that I'm fundamentally wrong about the nature of reality. But you can adjudicate this. This is not complicated. We have tools like the prayer, the Harvard prayer study, or intercessory prayer would be. It's just so easy to test, and it should be so. But if you don't accept the results of the test, large and rigorous methodology, then you're just holding your belief anyway, right? I mean, that's the whole idea of why we test something. But if the test revealed that, yeah, there were differences when people were prayed for, better health outcomes or what have you, they recovered more quickly, and we broke that down in a data set, the people would be the people who believe in prayer, intercessory prayer, would be the first people to point to that data as evidence. So evidence doesn't work that way. You have to start from position of saying, like, you have to be a slave to the evidence. You can't just capriciously decide, well, I don't like this, or I like this, or this comports with my ideology, so I'm going to believe it. No, you believe what the evidence is.
Is there an effective way to debate a religious person in order to convince them to doubt or question their faith?
Yeah, I wrote a whole book about that, a manual for creating atheists.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in an hour with Pageau, you didn't convince him, right?
Yeah, but that wasn't my goal.
Oh.
And I didn't think, I mean, maybe if I had walked in there with that goal, it would have been, I still don't think I would have convinced him. Because smarter people are better at rationalizing. But why, that's the other thing. Why would what would be the goal of me? And the other thing, because the conversation is recorded, it would be different. So, because then you have the variable of saving face and you have the variable, but my goal was not to convince him not to be a Christian. In fact, I think at this point in my life, I've come to the conclusion that some people are far better believing in Christianity than the alternatives.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about street epistemology, but first I want to quickly ask you, I mean, I say quickly, it's kind of a big question, but what do you think is the biggest error of critical thinking that people are making today? What pisses you off the most? Where do you think people are going the most crazy today? What's the view that to you? Like,
it's a very long conversation. It's a very long conversation. So I am amazed at how monstrously stupid the world has become. I am amazed at the sheer level of idiocy. Defund the police. Believe all women. Every disparity in outcome is a result of systems. And those are just three. Let's not close the southern border. Let's let millions of people illegally immigrate here. I'm just amazed. People pretending to not know things that everybody knows.
Can I try to steelman one or more of those and just
100%? Please, in fact, I insist upon it.
All right. So you said defund the police, believe all women, disparity in the border, and now I will say I'm not an what did you say?
Those are just some. I mean, we could do.
Yeah. So I'm not an expert. I'm not a policy expert, but I do have some thoughts on this. So and the bigger thing for me, like when I look at whether it's these issues or Israel, Palestine, or really anything going on in our world, I feel like a lot of people have an opinion that many others might agree with, but the way they express themselves, either intentionally or accidentally, comes off as the most extreme version of that opinion, which seems abhorrent. So, for example, let me Steelman, what I think people should mean when they say defund the police is people saw a series of events where police officers were breaking the rules and doing bad stuff. And so they said, that sucks. I want to do something to those police officers. Let's do something. Let's moderate them. Let's defund them. And so, yeah, at its utmost, taking all the money from the police is a stupid idea. I would bet you that most people who were angry at the police for killing George Floyd, for example, didn't want to get rid of the police in the country. They probably wanted some restrictions. And the way that they're voicing that is defund the police. But it's not. But I think most people wouldn't take that literally. So how do you contend with that, like the moderate view of it?
Well, you always have to ask what people mean by something. But let's go back to something like, well, what do you mean defund the police? Getting back to the Pageau conversation, many people who have strong liberal impulses don't believe that people believe what they say they believe. They don't believe that people believe the earth is like just a few thousand years old. They don't believe that people actually believe it's a talking snake or some guy walked on water. They don't believe that people actually believe it. They don't believe that people actually believe.
What do you mean they don't believe? Everyone knows there's religious people out there.
Many secular, liberal secular people. So let's linger on this point before we move to anything else, because you just said a lot there, and there's a lot to unpack. Many people who have strong liberal impulses do not believe, they're steeped in their conception of rationality, and they do not believe that people believe that there was an actual talking snake. They believe that's a metaphor. They believe that they believe it's a metaphor. And so it's very difficult for many people who have constructed particular worldviews to believe that people have beliefs that are so out of alignment with their conception of reality that they actually believe them. But the fact of the matter is they do actually believe them. There was an article published in the New York Times. Please pull it up if you don't mind. Yes, we actually do mean abolish prisons. And that's even worse than abolishing police.
I'll pull it up.
Yeah, so that's one issue. Another issue is that
that's an opinion. But my point that I'd be curious to hear what you think is tell me if I'm right, if I'm wrong. Some people are crazy and write opinion pieces like, yes, we actually do mean abolish the police. That's some people. Some people are crazy. Some people are racist. Some people are anti-Semitic.
Sure.
But except extreme views. But a lot of people who hated the way that the police killed George Floyd, for example, thought that we should do something about the police. And so they're raising their hands in anger and they're trying to, and so defund the police, whatever that means, like what I'm saying is,
you think it's an unfortunate slogan?
I think there's people on one end I think there's a spectrum. I think it's an unfortunate slogan, but I guess like a lot of these issues, the next one, believe all women, is, again, like, the way that came about is like, some women, got raped or something and people didn't believe them. And so now they're like, wait a minute, you should believe women more. And then there's a spectrum of belief. So some people who are a little out there say you should believe 100% of women, which is obviously crazy because some women want. But the general sentiment of these four things you mentioned, defund police, believe women, I think wouldn't you agree with me that there's value in maybe the moderate form of what each of these four things stand for? Like, wouldn't you, Peter Boghossian, like to see some reform in police if they're killing black people for no reason? Wouldn't you like to see?
This is a huge. Okay, so we really need to slow down and unpack this because there are so many variables that are being mixed together here. So the four claims that I gave, among those, you're maybe too young for the Sesame Street thing. Like, which one of these things?
I remember the Sesame Street.
Which one of these things is not like the other? The systems, every outcome is a result of systems. Every disparity in outcome. That's not like the other thing. So let's go back. So yes, there are a range of positions that people hold, from we're just angry, we want to do something, so let's scream about defunding the police, to the people who actually want to defund the police. So absolutely there is a range. My friend David Silverman used to be not only in the orbit of critical justice, but a pusher of the ideology. And now he's to say the least, not a pusher of the ideology. He's fighting the ideology, but he was a believe all women guy until two women, pretty sure that's correct, accused him of rape, and then he changed his tune quite differently. And he did believe that you should believe all women. So, yes, there are differences. People mean different things by those positions. Now, taking a step back even further, people will hold beliefs because, this answers your other question, people will hold beliefs because on non-epistemic grounds. So they'll hold beliefs on moral grounds. They'll hold beliefs because they want to belong to a community. And so that's what they value more than being right, is being loved, is being a friend, is being welcomed and accepted for who they are. And so they'll, the fashionable virtue signaling, they'll say things that they think are virtuous and they want to be perceived as virtuous so they can be members of the community. It's like putting pronouns in your bio, for example. Yep. That's a community aspect of it. So when you're talking about belief and you're talking about why people believe things and you're talking about slogans that people utter, yes, there's a range of people from true believers to people who just are upset. Years ago when I taught in, what did I teach? Loyola, was it Loyola? Or what's the other one down there in New Orleans? Tulane. I can't remember the words, but anyway.
Tulane.
I asked at the time of the war, I told everybody to put their everything under the desk except the paper and pencil or pen. And I asked who was in favor of the war, raise your hand. And everybody in class except for 3 people raised their hand. It's the Iraq War. And then I said, okay, write down 3 countries that are next to Iraq. Almost nobody in class could do so. So they wanted a war, but they knew nothing about it. It's a similar situation. Most people wouldn't have any idea how much the police are funded, how many people are on the police department. Most people wouldn't have any idea about, for example, the conviction rates of rapists or the average disparity between Asians and blacks on SAT scores, or Ashkenazi Jews and whites, or what have you. They wouldn't have the faintest clue. They wouldn't know that Asians have been systemically discriminated against in higher institutions of learning. But they latch on to slogans because other people in their community latch on to those slogans as well.
But don't you think that, okay, so let me reframe my position or my question.
Sure.
So let's say the police do a bunch of terrible shit, like unjustly kill people.
Yep.
Shouldn't you and I, in light of that, say to each other, gosh, that's so terrible. Something's got to change. I don't know what, but something. Like, isn't it a rational, appropriate reaction? I'm saying, so defund the police being on one end of the spectrum is too extreme. Sure. But isn't it proper, in light of police doing bad stuff, to want something to change?
Okay.
Like
so now
something in the direction of police. And why I think this is important, when you say, oh, defund the police, what a stupid idea. I think then to some people, they're saying, well, wow, the conservatives, they don't think we should do anything about the police.
Okay. So this is yet again another area in which we really need to slow down and talk about. Your epistemology should always precede everything. So before you start talking about doing something, you have to ask, what are the police doing wrong? And many of the people, in fact, I would argue the vast majority of the people claiming to defund the police believed that the police were murdering black citizens. Roland Fryer's work, the black academic at Harvard, shows that that's not true. Other people have shown that that's not the case. When you ask people, I asked my neighbors, just one example, how many blacks are killed by the police? She told me 22,500 are killed a year. So that's just simply untrue. Wilfred Riley has some great stuff. He's explained this time and time again. Before you start talking about reforming the police department, you have to have a meaningful conversation that's backed by data and evidence of what the police are doing that is the problem. And then you attempt to fix the problem through democratic means. So you can't just get some, feeling in your heart that you don't like the police because you see a picture of a black kid who's killed, and you make assumptions about that. You have to look at the data. And if you don't do that, then you'll be subject to whatever moral fads of the day and whatever capriciousness is out there. And we're just not doing that. But the other thing that's important to understand, that's nobody's fault. We're just not trained. We're not hardwired to do that. And our K through 12 systems are not teaching people. In fact, they're teaching people to do exactly the opposite.
And this, by the way, you don't remember this, but this is exactly how our conversation went 3 years ago, where I had over the course of an hour, you convinced me and I conceded entirely. And so now my argument is shrinking and shrinking, but I'm still grasping on to a piece of it, which is, let's say I agree with you, defund the police is a terrible idea. The point that I think is important is, in light of police brutality, maybe it's anecdotal or whatever it is, in light of that, shouldn't we have a reaction?
Okay, so let's take a look at that. So let's
say, hey, what's going on? What's going on? Is it systemic? Is it not? Is it just these two guys? And what's going on? And let's do something. Shouldn't we get angry? Shouldn't we not react too quickly? But it needs a response, right? Shouldn't we respond in some way, or at least interrogate what's going on? Okay,
so let's take a look at that. So if you want to make the claim that there's police brutality, and I'm not saying there is or isn't, I'm saying if that's the claim and we want to accept and we start with that, the question is, well, what should be done about it? But the former question is, what do you mean by brutality? Or what do you mean by, if you want to say, well, young black men are arrested at radically disproportionate numbers to, I don't know, older Asian women. I'm assuming that's true. I just threw that out there. And we need to rectify this, because this is a disparity that a civil, democratic, rational society should not tolerate, and we shouldn't give countenance to anyone who wants to argue the opposite. Well, Matt Thornton in The Gift of Violence has, the author of The Gift of Violence, has said repeatedly, you can dislike this fact, but this is a fact about reality.
Sure.
So men commit crimes at vastly higher rates, particularly physical crimes, assault, etc., than women, and rape. Now, you can dislike that, but that's just the fact of the matter. But nobody says that the police is harboring some anti-male bias because they're arresting men more than they're arresting women. But people do say that about African Americans.
George Floyd, they shouldn't have killed George Floyd, right? Like he shouldn't have been killed, right?
You mean he shouldn't have died? I mean, ideally he wouldn't have died. I mean, ideally he wouldn't have died.
Well, he was killed. He was killed, right?
Yeah, he was killed, but he had drugs in his system. He had respiratory issues. I'm not defending that. You know, I do jujitsu, and I knew that move. If anybody did that to me, that's called a dick move. Like, you don't put your knee on the back of someone's neck. It's just, but I don't know what the rule. I'm not an apologist for the police. I don't know if what he did was in accordance with police tactics. I'm not a tactical officer, but my point to you, and my point to you is more broad in that when you say police brutality, you're kind of, or not even more than kind of, you're negatively influencing the conversation, because you've put a loaded word in. It's, in philosophy, you call it a thick word right from the beginning. So you have to like get away from those evaluative words, and you just have to say, this is the problem. And if the claim is that the problem is that they're arresting more black men, and this is, then
I'm not saying that. I'm saying, because I hear you're giving data about the quantities of who's arrested. I'm saying, like, there were a few explicitly egregious events where black people were killed and they shouldn't have been. Okay, so those events shouldn't have happened. Now you can say that they're statistically anecdotal or whatever, but they happened. They were bad. Shouldn't we be upset when people die and they shouldn't die?
So again, we need, this is a kind of,
I'm not saying defund the police, but shouldn't we have a reaction?
I understand. So this is exactly, once again, where we need to slow down. Is the problem that the police, is the problem that the people the police killed were black, or is the problem the police killed anybody at all? But let's just accept by fiat that we know that police have not acted. I'm just making this up. We know that there are police in a major city in the United States, say City Z, and in City Z, there's a thing in LA where this is what the show The Shield was based off of. I don't know if it's a while ago. It's a wonderful show with Michael Chiklis. One of the best pilots of all time. But anyway, let's say that we know that there's a police department in City Z, and the cops have run rampant and they're just starting killing people all over the place. Should we be outraged at that? Well, I don't know if we should be outraged about that, but we should certainly do something about it. We should certainly use the machinery of the judicial system to bring them to justice. So we need to act upon examples of, that's why I'm not a police officer, but that's why they have internal affairs. That's why they have mechanisms in place to prevent police overreach. So yeah, absolutely, we should do something about it. But before we do anything about it, we have to make sure that we're acting on the best available data and evidence, as opposed to just our gut feeling. We don't like the George Floyd incident, let me give you an example. Let's say, for example, there's evidence to show a rational person that black people are pulled over more frequently than white people, right, by police officers. Well, you need to really figure, okay, so we have the body cams, we match the description of the person with the license, and then we figure out, is that the case? And if that's the case, why is that the case? Maybe it's a socioeconomic thing. Maybe we break it down by neighborhood. Remember, we also have, and again, Wilfred Riley is a great person for that. He just tweeted out some stuff about this today. After the George Floyd riots, murder rates in cities have been going up. Let me give you one simple concrete example, and you tell me what you think about this. The city of Portland, Mayor Ted Wheeler, who in my opinion is a disgrace, the city of Portland did away with the gun reduction task force because they thought it was racist, because it was too many young African American men were being arrested. When they did away with the gun reduction task force, guess what happened? You think older middle class guys like me I did totally nothing. The number of homicides among young black men went up. So it's, we also have the Ferguson effect. We also have, I just think we need to be very, very careful about reacting to gut instincts. And we need to remind ourselves that in a democracy, if you don't like a statue, there are mechanisms to take it down. If there are police overreach or what have you, search and frisk was a big thing a few years ago. We need to work within the system. There are mechanisms that we can use to bring officers who are abusing the law to justice.
Yeah. No,
seems very reasonable to me.
So you really put a magnifying glass up to the claim. The claim is, hey, the police officers are doing bad things to black people. And you're saying, well, are they doing bad things? Is it to black people? What's the frequency? What's the situation? Is it systemic? You're asking all these questions. When it comes to other issues like trans, rapid onset dysphoria, have you done that level of interrogation on the data as well? Have you fact checked? Like my understanding, my limited understanding of rapid onset dysphoria is that there's only one study. It's not so legit. We don't know to what extent that rapid onset dysphoria is like a real thing. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah. Okay. So I have a lot of thoughts on that. So again, you have to look at epistemology, how people know these things, right? That's the key claim, or that's the key thing that should be in the fore of your mind, whether it's in a conversation with Jonathan Pageau or whoever. How does somebody know this? What is someone's evidence for this? So the Cass report from Hillary Cass came out fairly recently, and it went through claims about gender dysphoria, relief of gender distress, the gender affirming care. I hate that. I was trying to think of another way to say it, but gender affirming care. Michael Schellenberger has exposed WPATH. So I think this would be the first time anybody knows this. I don't know if it's a secret, but I'll tell you on your podcast. I just called Stella O'Malley the other day, the leader of the organizer, the head of Genspect. I'll be in Portugal at Genspect in September. And I told her that, so I hope this answers your question with a sledgehammer. I told her that Genspect is right across the street from the WPATH conference. And I told her that I would like to invite, and that's the main those are the main advocates for gender affirming care. I would like to invite anybody who's a primary speaker to come on stage with me at Genspect and have a civil, not a debate, not just the same as I did with Pageau, a conversation for why they believe what they believe, what do they believe, and what the evidence is. Isn't that the best way to figure stuff out, is to find people who actually believe these things and have a conversation with them?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. What do you think their reaction is going to be? Because this will be made public very shortly.
Let's see. Hopefully someone stands up and
No,
agrees.
they're not going to come.
I think if someone thinks you're doing it in bad faith, then they won't. But they shouldn't. You're not a bad faith. I don't see you as a bad faith person, obviously, right? I think that you're a sincere guy, so they should hopefully see you that way as well, and they should agree to it.
But they won't. They won't come. We know they won't come. And I would love to be wrong, because I think that would be a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, I have if you're willing, I don't know about that level of expertise, but I have a friend who's dying to talk to you about this stuff.
No, it'd have to be someone who's a main speaker at
Okay.
the WPATH conference. But the idea for the, have you looked into something like gender affirming care? Ideally, what you would do is you would have a conversation with someone who genuinely believes what they claim to believe, and who has domain specific expertise. And this is the propositional, like, people are making claims. They're expressing those claims, like they have beliefs, they're expressing that in language, and we should be able to have a civil, rational conversation about it. And just like look, whether or not you're for data, you're for, hormones for children or what have you, you just have to look at what the evidence is. It's just, it has to come down to evidence. And remember when I go some places, it's like, oh, Boghossian, this controversial guy, like, yeah, believe on the basis of evidence as in some kind of great controversy.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I should know this, I don't know this, but as far as like adults transitioning to a different gender, you're good with that?
100%. I don't think you can transition to a gender. I think you can undergo a procedure. You undergo certain medical procedures that have certain outcomes. But anybody over 18 can do anything they want with their genitalia, providing it's with a consenting adult.
Yeah. I mean, I really want to get the street epistemology, but you keep saying these things. But do you believe gender, sex difference? There's a difference?
Oh, I don't know. John Money. I mean, I think it's a ridiculous kind of conversation. More or less coin gender. I think that, I think people like Colin Wright have done some really good work on sex and what that word means. I actually had a conversation with Colin and someone else about that, trying to really flesh out and disambiguate those key terms. I think that it's a far less complicated issue than one thinks. You have people like Judith Butler that say people perform gender, but basically, I think in gender trouble, I think people conflate or confuse the issues. I'm at core, would consider myself a classical liberal if I had to consider myself anything. And if we need to respect the way that people want to live their lives, even if it doesn't accord with what our own values are, providing they're not hurting someone else. So if someone is a dude and he wants to wear a dress and he wants to, have bottom surgery to remove his testicles and penis, that's none of your business. Who you sleep with is none of my business. It's certainly none of Biden's business or anybody else's business.
It's a longer conversation that maybe another day, but in whatever time we have left, can you tell me quickly, what is this newest street epistemology thing you're doing? And can we do a live impromptu session?
Sure. So Reed and I travel around the world, Reed and Icewinder, and we do spectrum street epistemology, and we've been to, we go everywhere. You can see these in our channel. We'll be releasing soon the videos from Taiwan that we did. And we have mats that we place on the ground, and the mats say strongly agree, slightly agree, neutral, and then on the other side. And then we'll have conversations with people about what they believe, and we'll throw out claims, and we'll work together with someone, okay, what do you want to talk about? And then we'll talk about those things. And we see if the reason and evidence they have for their beliefs is accurately calibrated. So they're standing on the right mat. So should they be strongly agree, slightly agree, or what have you? And then we just ask them Socratic questions, which are basically targeted questions that ask them if they agree with themselves. It's a very non-confrontational, not adversarial way to, and when I do it in Portland, people, can I swear on your show?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, when I did it in Portland a little while ago, someone walked by and yelled, "Fuck you, Peter Boghossian." So even that idea of asking people questions is somehow mortifying. Of course, it was near my old university, because that's what they're not. So questions are part of the problem. It's part of the patriarchy that they can't handle it.
Yeah. Well, do you think that empathy is a thing there? Because like the defund the police thing, I feel like when you say that you don't like to defund the police, some people hear that as, oh, he doesn't care that they killed these people. And if you lead with, hey, I think it's terrible the police have killed these people.
Wait a second. Wait a second. How do you go from defund the police is a bad idea to Boghossian doesn't care that these people died? Like, that's an extraordinary chasm.
Because some people view defund the police as representing the response. I'm not saying they're correct. I'm saying I think that it's like you said with Pageau, right? Like you seek to understand him. So I believe that a lot of people saw the killing of George Floyd and others and were repulsed and were disgusted and didn't do the thorough analysis that you described. And the way they reacted was, let's defund the police. And so if I were to approach them and say, let's not defund the police, they would say, what do you mean? You don't care they killed George Floyd? And if I could talk to them, I could explain, no, I do care, but Peter convinced me of the data. So, but I'm saying, like, in absence of that long form conversation, I feel like the messaging that's important is to say, hey, people, I am opposed to the fact that they killed George Floyd, and I don't think that defund the police is the right solution.
Sure. Yeah.
So to take the trans issue, when you don't lead with that empathy and you just say, I think this trans stuff is BS, people don't realize that you have respect for trans people, even though they should. That's what I think.
Yeah. I mean, if the idea is that we should frame things then appropriately, then 100%. There are people, no matter how many times I've said, I think adults should be able to do what they want with their own genitalia, that doesn't prevent, or it hasn't prevented. Look what's happening to J.K. Rowling or Kathleen Stock or others.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not going to prevent people who are basically, I think they have narcissistic personality disorders and they've latched into other communities. And, you know, if somebody is really angry and you say, I don't think the police should be defunded, and they jump to, well, you don't care about people from X demographic or what have you. Well, those people aren't thinking clearly about the issue.
Today, people who are very pro-Israel and don't show enough empathy for Palestinians dying in Gaza, some people will look at them and say, you're a monster, you're genocidal, you don't care about Gazans dying, even though they do. And so it's important to express that. Or people on the flip side, people who are sympathetic with Palestinians and who don't condemn Hamas because they're too focused on their own suffering. It's like, I just feel like if we don't express empathy to the other side, no matter what issue it is, then we leave ourselves open to be considered, anyway.
Well, let me, I'm not sure that's true.
No.
I mean, can you think of, okay, so this would be an example of how to have a conversation, a tool to have a conversation. Instead of me giving you an example of when you shouldn't have empathy toward a position, I would frame it in terms of a question and ask you, can you think of a position to which a reasonable, rational, sane person would not want to have empathy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then if you can think of that position, then we should not have empathy in that case, right?
Yeah, but if half the country, so like, for example, like I don't like Trump. My mom, no one hates Trump more than some people in my family. and they think that anyone who supports Trump must be a terrible person. And
Right.
I can draw that connection. Like, yeah, he tried to this January 6th, like he's a narcissist. Like I can easily paint the picture of how he's a terrible person, but half the country likes him. So either I think half the country are morons, or I admit that maybe there is some rational view to believe in Trump, even though he's a shit person. So likewise, with all these issues you're describing, like if a third of the country believes in it, either we think they're all idiots or there's something to what they're saying for them.
Yeah, I'm not sure that empathy is the necessary default for all positions. Like, I don't have empathy for people who hate Jews, who want to throw Jews in oven,
Right.
or Armenians.
Yeah, me neither.
Like,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not, I don't, so there are
Right.
some people for whom empathizing with those positions would be not merely inappropriate, but grotesque.
Yeah. That's true. Yep.
So sometimes when people say stupid shit, you have to be forthright in your speech. I think you should be forthright in your speech anyway, and call them out, but call them out in a way that's reasonable and compassionate. And you can do that without being a dick.
Yeah. Sorry, you'll notice I'm like saying yeah, then switching topic just because each of these things I could spend 6 hours with you, man. So I'm sorry that I'm moving.
Wait, I know you start drinking.
You have, what do we have for time? 10 minutes?
No, you go. I have so much shit to do, but I'll do it later.
Yeah, fuck it. This is whatever. You get to that whenever you. Okay, let's get back to street epistemology. So can we do this virtually?
Yeah, it's a little harder and it's a little less interesting, but sure. Yeah. What claim do you want to examine?
Of mine?
Oh yeah. What belief do you hold that you feel strongly about?
Is that the question? I want to do this properly. You know?
Yeah. Well, give me some beliefs. So like, this is what we do. We just say, okay, well, what do you want to talk about with people?
Beliefs.
We really don't have any set agenda. We just say, well, what do you want to talk about?
What beliefs do I hold that I want to challenge?
No, that you feel strongly about, like a 7 out of 10 or higher.
Can you give me some leading something? I don't even know where to begin.
I'll give you a ton. Or if you go to our channel, you can just look at what people those. So, well, a contemporary one was, the men should not be in women's boxing events. One of our most common claims, the popular claims, that people want to talk about are aliens. Everybody loves aliens. Aliens exist, and the aliens visit us on a regular basis is one. Let's see.
I mean, I share a lot of your view. I think that I think it's unreasonable to believe in religion from using epistemology. I think having faith is perfectly fine. You should believe whatever you want, but claiming it's true, I think it's fallacious. I think that my relationships are essential. I don't.
Okay, let's go to this one since we started the conversation like this. So let's drill down on this. So let's use the words faith, religion, and true. Make a claim out of two or more of those. Like make a statement out of those of something you believe.
I think that it's fine to live your life in accordance with a religion out of faith and belief, but I don't think that the stories of the Bible are true, and I think that claiming that they are true is inaccurate.
What, all the stories?
Just the supernatural ones.
So, you believe that people should be allowed to live according to the dictates of their own faith?
To the extent that it doesn't harm other people or themselves, yeah.
Okay. And or themselves.
You shouldn't. Ideally, yeah. I mean, or to the extent that it doesn't harm other people, yeah.
Okay. And then the other one you believe is that the stories of the Bible aren't true.
That's right. When I say not true,
the metaphysical stories.
Well, not even the ones that are not metaphysical, that whether or not they're true, it's like saying, well, there could be a 5-headed dragon. I can't say it's not true, but there's no good reason to believe that they are true.
Okay, so you have no good reason to believe that they're true.
That's right.
Okay, so on a scale from 1 to 10, the main stories of the Bible are true. Where would you be? With 10 being, I'm absolutely positive they're true.
A one or probably a 0.5 maybe.
Okay, so what if the scale is 1 to 10, just to make it simple?
One.
So you believe there's no possibility that they're true? Like
No, I said one.
Okay, so maybe I should have. Okay, let's go back to 0 on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being absolutely no way they're true.
One.
Okay,
one.
so 1 on a scale from 0 to 10.
Sorry.
So, no. So if the scale is 0 to 10, you're 1?
1. Yeah.
Okay, how come you're not 0.5? Like you said before.
Because this is a somewhat arbitrary, vague scale. I mean, we haven't quantified what a 1 even is. So it's my sort of kind of like testing the air.
Okay. So let's say that 0 is absolutely impossible, 5 is maybe, and 10 is it's absolutely definitive.
Okay.
Where would you be?
1 or 2. We have 1, 2.
2. Now you're a 2.
Well, so you haven't defined the scale, and then you're saying, "Well, you won."
What, you see what just happened there?
Yeah. What's happening is you're changing the definitions of.
No, I'm not changing
As you change it, I adapt.
I'm not changing the definition at all.
You said 1 to 10, 0 to 10. Well, 5 means this. Well, why don't you define what a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10
Okay,
is?
well, you're taking this pretty seriously then. Okay. Well, 5 is maybe, 10 is absolutely yes, and 0 is absolutely no.
Yeah, so I'd say
this is what we do if we had a mat, right?
Yeah, I see. So I would say no. I'm not gonna move. I'm saying 1. I'm sticking at 1.
On a 0 to 10, so why aren't you at a 0.5?
But so this is the challenge I have with this thing we're doing. We haven't defined these.
Okay,
enough,
so why is so let's go back.
I could be.
Let's delete this. Let's delete this conversation and let's go to the mat idea. That's why I said it's difficult to do this speaking. It's much easier to do this when you're physically standing and you can watch someone move.
If you haven't quantified, you could say this or that.
We're gonna change the scale.
Yeah.
We're gonna change the scale. We're gonna make it strongly agree, slightly agree, neutral, slightly agree, slightly disagree, and strongly disagree. So we're gonna change the scale.
Yeah.
So we have a new scale. I'm going to give you the claim.
Yep.
The stories in the Bible are true. Where do you stand?
I'd say strongly disagree.
Okay. So how come you're not on disagree?
Because I can't know that they're false. So they could be true.
Okay. What method would you take for knowing that they were? What would it take for you to move to the disagree?
They're impossible because I can't disprove them. You can't really disprove anything. Anything could be true.
It's impossible for you to move to the disagree?
For the non-supernatural claims of the Bible, like, for example, that
it's impossible.
Lived here and then they moved there and then they...
No, for the supernatural claims.
The supernatural claims. No. I would say that they couldn't be true. Well, it depends what we mean by could be. Like, I don't think it's rational to... I think it's... Okay, I would say 0 out of 10. Do I think it's reasonable to think that they...
No, we've done away with that scale. Yeah. We're on a new scale now.
So do I think that they are true? I would say... no, I'd say 0. Totally...
So you strongly disagree. Let's forget about that scale. You're getting caught. Forget about that scale. Forget about that. We're on a new scale.
New scale.
Strongly agree... Yep. Agree, slightly agree, neutral.
Yeah.
Slightly disagree, strongly disagree.
Yeah.
Let's reset this whole thing. You probably have to edit this out. So let's do it.
Maybe.
So the metaphysical stories in the Bible are true. What line are you on?
I want to be very precise with how I'm answering because strongly disagree.
Okay. And what would it take you to move to disagree?
Is disagree less severe than strongly? Of course it is, yeah. What would it take for me to move to disagree? Some evidence, I guess. Yeah, some evidence of those metaphysical supernatural events.
What about the thousands of years and literally millions of books that Christians have written discussing in great detail the evidence.
That's not evidence.
Why not?
Because why not?
Have you read those books?
No, but this is my religious argument, is that premise one is that we have a system for ascertaining historical reality and truth, and that system has led us to history textbooks, which contain things about the Roman Empire and all these other events. And we trust in those means, and we trust in the results, meaning the history textbooks. The fact that the stories are not in the history textbooks, to me, proves that they haven't met the threshold of evidence, which, like, we have a threshold for ascertaining what we can believe is true. If it hasn't met the threshold, it's not fair to say it's true. And then people usually ask me, well, what is that process? And I can read it to you if you want, but it's a sequence of primary, secondary sources, archaeological events, like, et cetera. Sorry?
Okay, so that's Bart Ehrman's argument in a nutshell. So your claim...
Wait, sorry, I lost you for a second. What was the last thing you said?
I said that's Bart Ehrman's argument in a nutshell. I don't know if you know
whose argument?
Bart Ehrman.
I haven't heard of him, no.
Anyway, okay. So let's take a look at this. The history books and the way the history is done, they make recordings of naturalistic phenomena. They don't record supernatural phenomena. That's not what history does.
Right.
So why would you use history as a tool to understand non-naturalistic phenomena when that's not what it does? I mean, you don't use a kitchen strainer to, like, I don't know.
So do we have a method for ascertaining truth about the sorts of phenomenon that you're describing?
Lived experience.
Okay, what's an example of something that we believe today because of lived experience?
Revelation.
But we don't believe that as a global society, believe in the revelation. As a secular global society, we don't believe in that.
Well, yeah, that's because that's why you need to proselytize, because they haven't heard the good word. Only if you've heard the good word. There are no examples on islands, for example, of people spontaneously believing in Jesus.
Right.
There's a great book about that. Don't sleep, there are snakes. About a missionary who goes into a village in which no one can understand translate.
But that's not an accepted method. So forget history textbooks. Why do 0% of secular universities in the world teach the biblical stories in their history classes?
Well, because they're secular.
But so we don't trust. But if something happened in reality, then it's a secular reality.
Yeah, but that's a post facto explanation for the phenomenon.
No, but if something happens, like if the stories of the Bible actually happen, they don't need to just be in religious classes. They should be in history classes because they're reality.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm asking you is, so we veered from street epistemology here and kind of got into a justification for this. Mm-hmm. So what I'm asking you is, your method of being on the strongly disagree, you're using history as an example, but it doesn't seem to me that that's what history does. History is not a method for ascertaining the truth of supernatural phenomenon. History is a method of documenting natural.
We do not have a method for showing supernatural phenomenon, and proselytizing is not a method.
No, right. It's not a method. So we don't have a method for showing supernatural phenomenon, although the Catholics would disagree with that. Christopher Hitchens has a great piece about that when he's the devil's advocate. But so absent that method, why would you be on the strongly disagree? Maybe it's just we haven't developed the method yet. And if we had the method,
there ain't no method. So why should I believe in it? What do I?
Well, maybe it's just the fact that we haven't developed the method yet.
Sure, let's go with that. So there's no reason for me to believe it.
Why?
The story.
Why?
Because there's no evidence.
No, there's a lot of evidence. We have the unequivocal testimony of the people
But I said that's not evidence. That's not real evidence. And then I said, you said why? And I said because it doesn't stand up to the thresholds we have. And you said, well, this is a different type of evidence. And I'm saying the evidence that you're mentioning, it's not evidence because you can't measure it. You can't. it can't be used to prove anything. There's no method to use that evidence. It's not evidence, is what I'm saying.
Okay, so how do you know that your conception of evidence, and you are in the minority of the minority of the minority? Why would we take your conception of evidence when we have, forget history, even if you just look at it in terms of the number of people who are believing or practicing Muslims or Christians or Jews or what have you, we are overwhelmingly religious societies, even in the supposedly post-Christian Europe. So why would your conception of evidence trump theirs?
My conception of evidence is aligned to the United States, is aligned to the world. So
but most people in the United States are Christians.
Most people in the United States are Christians, but our institutions, like, I guess the question to you is, like, do you believe that we have processes for discerning reality as a society, like a reality that we could agree to, like, for all intents and purposes, like this is a table, like that's a couch. Napoleon ruled France. Like, do we believe that the methods we use to ascertain reality work or don't? And if we think they do work, then we'll look at the products of those and we'll look what's missing from those. So whether the majority of a society is Christian, Jewish, Muslim, but my question remains, like, do you think that we as a society have a good method for figuring out reality?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, with the examples you gave, those are words, and you adjudicate the meanings of words by looking up in the dictionary, but there are several dictionaries that have just changed the meaning of the word woman.
Do we have a system for ascertaining truth in the United States?
Why did you make it in the United States?
In the world, do we have a system for ascertaining truth about the world?
Not really.
Not really. Okay, so then you can go outside and shoot someone because you don't.
Well, that's a moral claim. That's different.
But I'm saying, like, you believe in reality, like you're.
Well, we have a method to try to figure out how to be less wrong more often. Doesn't mean it's true.
Yes, but it's all we have. But fine, let's go with that. So we have a method to be less wrong more often, and that's all we have.
Okay, so this is veering from street epistemology. So I'll just run with the conversation then. We've kind of left that behind. That's why I didn't want to do it. That's why if you do it, you really got to get someone on the mat. It doesn't really work like this. But all right, but let's just go, because I'll argue something I don't believe. So go ahead.
Okay, I'm getting Peter Boghossian to defend religion. Please don't convince me to be a religious person. I spent so much of my life doing that. I'd be really upset because I'm gullible enough. And
but religion is just, I wrote about this in my first book. Religion is just, it's very different from faith. It's community. It's bingo. It's certain foods.
I'm talking about believing in the validity of the Bible. That to me, I don't want to do, because I don't.
Then why are you making me defend the other side?
Because you asked me what. Anyway, so
I feel you're. I hope you're not exasperated already by the conversation.
Not at all. No. I spent a year. So I mean, look back. If we want to just conclude the religion thing. So the last thing you said was, we do have a system in our society for being less wrong, and I'm saying all we've got. That's all we've got. And so any idea we have or belief we have has to go through that lens that you just mentioned. So, does gravity work?
Only empirical ideas that are testable go through that filter.
Right. And if they're not empirical, not testable, there's no sense in believing that they necessarily are true.
Unless you have another way of knowing them.
Which you don't in the case of the supernatural claims, because there's better explanations for those claims. If there weren't better explanations, then sure, Occam's razor, you could say maybe it happened. There is such you mentioned the Revelation. As it turns out, every ancient culture had oral history, oral tradition that was passed down generation for generation, and that's how we have stories like the Revelation.
So that happens to be my belief as well. I believe exactly what you just said. I mean, it's commonsensical to me. However, I'm not arguing that. I'm trying to put myself in a space to steelman a position that these folks would have, and that is that there are Well, there are many claims. One is that there is sufficient evidence that none of us have done our homework with it about it. That's why I had asked about if you read those books, but I think that's a silly objection. But nonetheless, that's one. The other one is that
no one has read the. What did you say? Say that again.
Well, there are many arguments that people could make. One is that there is sufficient evidence to warrant belief in these claims.
Yeah.
That was the criticism of Dawkins and the God delusion. You haven't read X, and they throw out some obscure thinker. The other argument is that there are different ways. The empirical phenomenon that they're talking about, like Jesus walking on water, which is one of my favorite claims, those empirical phenomena cannot be, we have no method of testing those phenomena.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that they didn't happen. And so they would claim that the confidence in those beliefs is miscalibrated to be lower than what they are, lower than what they should be.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah, I mean,
there's another claim too. There's the claim that you can know there are alternative modalities of knowing.
Mm-hmm.
But again,
there's not. There's not. Like we either know, I really believe in what I said, which is like we either have a coherent system for ascertaining truth, or we don't, and we should just go run around, in the street naked because we don't know if the sky's falling or what. Like we believe that, like as you said to Pageau, like when we walk outside, like the sidewalk's not going to fall into Jello, right? Like there's just. And if you're going to claim that we don't have a system for ascertaining truth, I would say you're fooling yourself, because we do, and we do, and you base your whole life around it. And so given that system, if something doesn't meet that threshold, you can, it's just not fair to say it is true.
Yeah. So here's the problem. So the problem is that any of these appeals that people make, we have millions of people who don't believe these things and who have their own personal testimonies to a radically different set of life truths, quote unquote truths, but quote unquote truths with a capital T. So, I mean, I'm agreeing with you. We've strayed far from street epistemology here, but I agree with that claim. That's why it's really important to center every conversation on how someone knows that. How does someone know the thing that they're claiming to know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So this has been great, man.
Yeah, we got a little lost in the weeds there at the end, but
maybe that's where we're going all along,
Yeah, it's good. And it's always, I think it's really good. I think it's important to steelman positions. I think it's super important to, and I should do that more than I do. I should steelman more. I think it's really important to talk to people with whom we have substantive disagreements. That's why I reached out to the people at WPath. They won't come. Then I would argue that that's both a value set and a disposition that you have. And if you truly believe that you were correct and not governed by ideology, you'd be more than happy to speak to someone who had a different worldview or belief set.
Can I ask you about your messaging to them? What did it say?
She sent me a email. Basically, we want to invite you to a stage for a conversation. Oh, if they invited me, I'd go.
Sorry, you said that to them.
Well, I didn't say that to them, but the conference organizer sent the email to their leadership.
Oh, I have.
But it's not public yet. It'll be public soon.
So let me. So Peter Boghossian, thanks so much for your time. This was amazing. You've been generous with your time. Let me end the recording, and then maybe we could spend a couple minutes wrapping up.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Jake.